Hey guys, so here's the agenda for today. We're going to do guided notes on Earth's layers, and then we are going to complete an activity along with the guided notes, and that will be Earth's layers graphic organizers. Both of these things are on your OneNote, so my suggestion is watch this video in its entirety, complete the guided notes. Remember the words in red are the ones you're filling in the blanks. And then after you finish the guided notes, go ahead and move on to the Earth's Layers graphic organizer activity. This is on your OneNote in Unit 3, right under this page. Use your guided notes to help you. That's really the ultimate way to complete that activity. So, let me make sure I'm recording. Okay. Write down this learning target in red in the box, the gray box on the top of your guided notes. Should look like this on OneNote. So go ahead, pause now and type it in. Okay, so a lot of these guided notes go along with this video, so I'm gonna try and stop it when I'm able to.
Welcome to Moo Math and Science. In this video, let's take a look at the layers of the Earth based on chemical composition and physical properties. The Earth can be divided into three layers based on chemical composition: the crust, the mantle, and the core. The outermost layer of the Earth is called the crust. There are two types of crust: continental and oceanic. The crust averages around 25 miles or 40 kilometers in thickness and can be divided into 15 major tectonic plates that are rigid in the center and have geological activity at the boundaries, such as earthquakes and volcanoes. The Earth's crust contains all three rock types, including igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. Oceanic crust lies under the ocean and is thin and is approximately 4 miles or 7 kilometers in thickness, and it's composed of dense rocks, including basalt. Continental crust is thicker and ranges from 6 to 47 miles or 10 to 75 kilometers in thickness, and it has a high abundance of less dense igneous rock like granite. The mantle is located between the crust and the core. It's a region of hot, slow-moving solid rock. The mantle is 1,800 miles thick, or 2,900 kilometers, and it's composed of silicate minerals, and they're similar to the ones found in the crust, except with more magnesium and iron and less silicon and aluminum. The core extends from below the mantle to the center of the Earth. Scientists believe the core is made mostly of iron and nickel. The core is the densest layer and makes up about 1/3 of the Earth's mass. The outer core is composed mostly of iron and nickel, with metals found in liquid form. The outer core reaches temperatures of 7,200 to 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's estimated to be about 1,400 miles thick, or 2,300 kilometers. The inner core is the hottest part of our planet and has temperatures between 9,000 and 13,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a solid layer, and it's around 755 miles or 1,200 kilometers thick, and it's composed mostly of iron. This iron is under so much pressure that it stays as a solid. The Earth can also be divided into layers based on physical properties, such as whether the layer is solid or liquid. The 5 physical layers are the lithosphere, asthenosphere, mesosphere, outer core, and inner core. The outermost rigid layer of the Earth is the lithosphere. The lithosphere is around 100 kilometers thick, and it's divided into tectonic plates. The Earth's lithosphere includes the crust in the upper part of the mantle, and it is hard and rigid outer layer of the Earth. The asthenosphere lies underneath, and it's made of solid rock that moves very slowly. It's described as viscoelastic, which means it can flow and also can be elastic. The asthenosphere is located below the lithosphere, and the tectonic plates move on top of the asthenosphere. The strong lower part of the mantle is called the mesosphere. Rock in the mesosphere flows more slowly than rock in the asthenosphere. The outer core is the liquid layer of the Earth's core, and the inner core is the solid part. The inner core extends from the bottom of the outer core to the center of the Earth. Thanks for watching, and Moo Math uploads a new math and science video every day. Please subscribe and share.
Okay, so that was a visual representation and overview of everything that we're going to be talking about. I know it was a lot of information, so we're going to go through each part a little more thoroughly and have notes for each part in each layer of Earth. And we're going to compare and contrast the difference between compositional layers and the physical layers, which they call mechanical layers in this video.
Welcome to Moo Math.
Okay, so Earth can be divided into three compositional layers, and these three compositional layers are based on what they are made out of, what material are they made out of, what chemicals make up each of these layers. So these are the three layers that we're going to be covering with the compositional. There's three: the crust, the mantle, and the core. The crust is made of a certain material, the mantle is made of a certain material, and the core is made of a certain material. So that's what compositional means. If we broke up the word compositional, it means composed, to be composed of. So composed also means made of. So compositional means what is making up these layers. So we have the crust, the mantle, and the core. And we can see that in this diagram. We have the crust, which is this green part. It's our thinnest layer. We have our mantle. Then we have our outer core, which in the video they said was liquid metal. And then we have our inner core. Really, when we're talking about the compositional layers, the outer and inner core are made of the same material, nickel and iron. So, when we're talking about compositional layers, we combine the outer and inner crust together and just call, or outer and inner core together and just call it the core because they're both made of the same material. So we have three compositional layers: crust, mantle, and core. Okay, so the crust is our outermost layer of Earth, and we have two types. We have continental and we have oceanic. Like we said in the video, continental is those lands. It's our continents. That's where the word continental come from. It's the crust that makes up our land. And then we have our oceanic crust, and that is at the bottom of the ocean floor, underneath all the water. And in the video, they also said that oceanic crust is denser than the continental crust. And that will be really important when we talk about plate tectonic movement later on in subduction, because the oceanic crust is denser. When those plates collide, the denser crust, sorry, my dogs are barking, will subduct or go underneath the continental crust because it's more dense. You know, when we drop a ball or something in water, the more dense ball will sink and the less dense ball will float. So, we'll get into more about why this density is so important later when we talk about plate tectonic movement. But for now, just remember that the oceanic crust is denser than the continental. Um, and it's actually thinner too. So this crust, the thinnest outermost layer of the Earth, is made of oxygen, silicon, and aluminum. So those are the three materials that make up the crust. Remember, when we're talking about compositional layers, we're talking about the material that they're made of. So what determines the crust is the material in which it's made of, which is oxygen, silicone, and aluminum. That's what differentiates the crust from the mantle and the core. It's what it's made of. Okay, now we're going to talk about the mantle. So the mantle is located between the core and or the core here and then the crust. And this is a region of hot, flowing, solid rock. And the mantle is denser than the crust. So all these particles are packed tightly together. There's a lot of matter in the mantle. It is way denser than the crust. And even though the material within the mantle is slow flowing, it doesn't mean it's a liquid. The mantle is solid. So the mantle is made of magnesium, aluminum, and silicone. This is what differentiates the mantle from the core and the crust, right? We said the compositional layers are what composes what each layer is made of. The mantle is made of different materials or a different percentage of chemicals than the crust. The crust does have aluminum and silicone, as well as the mantle. But the mantle has much, much less aluminum and silicone than the crust. So really like the main difference between the mantle and the crust, like the materials that make it up, is that there's a ton of magnesium within the mantle. So if you need more time writing in the words, pause the video. Okay. So the important thing about the mantle is that that's where convection takes place. So cooler rock, remember when we talked about convection and we put a pot of water on the stove and we turn the stove on? We talked about how the hot water is rising and then the cold water is sinking, and it's the circulation of fluids. And remember, we said that circulation of fluids is called convection. We talked about this in our heat transfer unit. So that process occurs in the mantle. Convection occurs in the mantle. So that cooler rock is sinking and that warmer rock is rising. And it's this circulation within the mantle. And again, it's solid rock moving. So that's the only difference. I know it's easy to think convection, we're thinking of liquids like water. No, the mantle's still solid. And here's the definition of convection, just so you have it on your notes, that convection is the movement of matter that results from differences in density caused by variations in temperature. We talked about this in our heat transfer unit with convection. Hot air is rising, higher temperatures rise, cooler temperatures fall. We get that circulation, that flow of warm and cold. So this happens in the mantle. So here's just another visual of what convection looks like. And we talked about this a lot in the heat transfer unit. But this is what allows the plate tectonics or the tectonic plates to move. And I didn't really talk about this quite yet, but the crust makes up our tectonic plates. And that's what our crust is. And these convection currents within the mantle are what allow those plates to move and form our mountains and volcanoes and earthquakes. So again, hot fluids rise, cold fluids sink. All right, so we're going to move on to the core. This is our third layer of our compositional layers. So our core is below the mantle and it's the center of our Earth. And it's our densest layer and makes up about a third of our Earth's mass, which is a huge amount of our mass. And it's made of iron and nickel, right? We said compositional layers again are determined by what makes up the layer. Because the core is made of iron and nickel, that's what makes it different from the mantle and the crust, because the mantle and the crust don't have a large amount of iron and nickel, but the core does. So this is our third and final layer of our compositional layers. Okay, so we have a guided notes question. You're going to list the layers in order from most dense to least dense. You can use the screen to help you answer it because I have a list of them on here. But you're going to order these layers in the correct order from most to least dense on your notes. You can take about 3 minutes to do this, a minute, however long it takes you, but please pause the video and attempt to do it yourself. Okay. All right, so we're going to order these most dense to least dense. So our most dense layer, remember, if we look back on our notes, is going to be the core. That is our most dense layer. It makes up a third of our mass, of our Earth's mass. Okay, so that should have been number one on your list. All right, so I know that the mantle is more dense than the crust. So mantle should be second on your list. And now I'm between these two different types of crust, the oceanic and the continental. Take a moment and think which one of these, oceanic or continental, is denser than each other. Okay, I hope you said that oceanic is denser than continental. So, remember our oceanic crust is that the sea floor underneath all the water, and then our continental crust is our land, our continents. So, our order should be one core, two mantle, three oceanic crust, and then our least dense should be continental crust. Okay, so now we're going to switch up and we're going to talk about the physical layers. And this is another way we divide the layers of Earth. And all of these physical layers are based on physical properties. So these properties can include whether the layer is solid or liquid and how the layer moves and transmits waves. So that's really what we're focusing on when we talk about the physical layers. We're not really focused on what exactly materials or chemicals make up these layers. We're focused on how they move, if they're solid or liquid, what's going on actually within these different layers. So go ahead, write down these five layers. Remember, you're writing the red. We are going to talk about the lithosphere, the asthenosphere, and the mesosphere. And then finally, the outer and inner core. So, compositional layers, we had three. Physical layers, we have five. So, we can see them here, and we have our lithosphere. It's that gray outline of the Earth. Then we have our asthenosphere. It's underneath. Our mesospheres in the middle. Meso means middle, so that's really a helpful trick to remember it. It's exactly in the middle of all these layers. We have the lithosphere and the asthenosphere that are outside of it, and then within or after the mesosphere, so deeper within the Earth, we have our outer core and inner core. So the mesosphere is right in the middle. Then we have our outer core, which is this yellow, and then our inner core, which I think, did these arrows mess it up? These arrows aren't right on here. Sorry, I don't know why, but all right. All right, lithosphere. So this is our outermost rigid layer of the Earth. And the lithosphere is what is divided into tectonic plates. So there's two parts of the lithosphere, and it's made of the crust, and then it's also made up of the upper part of the mantle. So, it's actually two of the compositional layers that make up the lithosphere. So the upper mantle, which is here, and then the crust. So that's our lithosphere. And the most important thing here is that it's divided into tectonic plates. Okay, now we have the asthenosphere. And this is a layer of weak or soft mantle that is made of rock that flows slowly. So the asthenosphere, the rock, remember we talked about how the mantle moves in convection currents. That's what's going on in that asthenosphere. That mantle is flowing in convection currents, and the tectonic plates are moving on top of this layer. So the asthenosphere is really the mantle, like the middle part of the mantle. It's all mantle, the asthenosphere. It's really like the top right under the lithosphere, and then there's some of the mantle left. So it's kind of in the middle of the mantle that we're talking about with the asthenosphere. And we're going to have a lot of convection currents going on. And then remember, we talked about the lithosphere having the um, tectonic plates. So this is the layer that moves the tectonic plates through convection currents. All right, the mesosphere. This is the strong lower part of the mantle, and rock in the mesosphere flows more slowly than the rock in the asthenosphere. So, that's the difference between these. We have in the asthenosphere faster moving mantle, It's moving pretty slowly, but it moves faster than the mesosphere. So we still have convection currents in the mesosphere. They're just not as fast and strong. Okay. Here's our outer core. This part right here. And the outer core is the liquid layer of Earth's core, and it lies beneath the mantle and surrounds the inner core. And remember when we talked about compositional layers, we said that the core is mainly made of nickel and iron. The only difference between the inner and outer core, because they're the same material. So the difference is that the outer core is liquid iron and nickel. The inner core is solid iron and nickel. So that's the difference between those. And remember, with physical layers, we're talking about the movement, the physical properties of each layer. And the physical property that's different from the outer core and the inner core is that the outer is liquid and then our inner is solid. So there we go. Our inner core is the solid, dense center of our planet. And again, it's the compositional makeup of the inner core is the same as the outer. It's iron and nickel. It's just in its solid form, right in the middle. And the reason it's so solid is because all of that pressure, it's like a diamond. When you're like squeezing sand really hard, you need like a pressure riser chamber or something. But when you're squeezing sand really hard, you can form a diamond because you're putting so much pressure on it. That's what's happening with the inner core. We're taking that iron and nickel and we're compressing it super, super hard at really high temperatures that we have a solid. Okay, so now we have a summary. This is at the end of your guided notes. So just spend the rest of the time filling in the blanks with the correct word or phrase. Pause the video now and we'll go over the answer. Okay, let's get started. So in the yellow box, it looks like we're talking about compositional layers. And then in our orange box, we're talking about the physical layers. So that's the difference between these two boxes. All right, in the yellow box, let's take a look. One, the outermost compositional layer of the Earth is the blank. So the outermost compositional layer. Okay, so let's go back to our compositional layers and find the answer to this question. Okay, here's the answer. It's the crust. This is the outermost layer of Earth. Remember, we have the oceanic crust and we have the continental crust. The continental crust is our continents or land, and our oceanic crust is that crust on the bottom of the ocean floor. All right. All right. Two, the blank is denser than the crust. So there's two answers you could actually put for this. You could have put in mantle or you could have put in the core. Either one works. You can write both of them down now if you want to have both of them on there. Okay, let's move on to the orange box, our five physical layers. So we're talking about those physical properties. Are they solid, liquid, gas? How do they move? So one, the blank is divided into pieces called tectonic plates. So let's go back and find our answer. All right, so your answer for this should have been lithosphere. This is our upper part of the crust or sorry, the whole crust and then the upper part of the mantle. That's our lithosphere. And the most important thing about the lithosphere is that it is divided into tectonic plates. And we'll talk more about those tectonic plates in our lesson next week. Okay. So that was your answer for number one, the lithosphere. Okay, number two, the blank core is the liquid layer. Oh, sorry, layer of Earth's core. All right, I'm trying to remember. We have the inner core, right? And we have the outer core. So our outer core is that liquid layer of Earth's core. And then our inner core is that solid layer of the core. And remember, Both the inner and outer core are the same material. They're both iron and nickel. The outer core is just liquid. The inner core is just solid. Okay, hopefully you got all those right. All right. So just silently answer this question. Pause the video once you have it, but which of these layers is most made of mostly nickel and iron? A mantle, B core, C lithosphere, D crust. So take a second, pause the video, think of your answer, and then come back when you have one. Okay. Hopefully you said the core. We just talked about that. So both the inner and outer core are made of nickel and iron. Okay. And then this is just a question, which I didn't put out on your notes, I meant to, but what are the differences between the inner and outer core? We just talked about this too. So I would type it somewhere, maybe on the bottom of your notes, this answer. So pause the video and just write your answer in your notes at the bottom. Okay, hopefully you said the difference between the inner and outer core is that the inner core is liquid and the outer core is liquid and the inner core is solid. Okay, so this is your assignment for Earth's layers. So this is the Earth's layers graphic organizer activity on your OneNote. So you're gonna label the Earth's layers and you're gonna complete the Venn diagram afterwards. So you'll see a picture of the Earth. It will look much like Ben's picture that was on your notes. And one side will be designated to filling out the compositional layers, and then one side will be designated to filling out the mechanical or physical layers. And then after you label your layers of the Earth, on the next page of that activity, there's a Venn diagram. And what you're going to do in the Venn diagram is you're going to compare what's the difference between the compositional and mechanical layers. And there's some guiding questions on there to help you fill the Venn diagram out. So that's what you should be doing after watching this video. If you don't understand anything, go ahead and go back and watch. This video is here for you to watch it as many times as you need. So, all right.